It's been just over a year since I made the difficult decision to smash open the piggy bank, bust out the money, and splash it all on a shiny new camera. That's not true. It's never a difficult decision for me to buy a new camera. In fact, it's one of the easiest things I can do with my money, and I think it's also one of the easiest things you can do with your money, and you shouldn't feel ashamed about buying a new camera. You're helping out a lot of people, aren't you? There's the people who engineer the camera, there's the people who design the camera, the people in the factory who make the camera, people who ship the camera to the camera store, people who work in the camera store. All of them people appreciate the money that you're spending on that new camera, so don't feel guilty whatsoever. Splash the cash, enjoy yourself. So for the last few years I've been shooting with a Nikon D610. It's a decent camera and you can get some decent pictures out of it, but it's got a few quirks that I wasn't happy about, particularly with the video mode. One of the weird things about it is if you want to change the aperture when you're shooting in video, is you have to come out of live view, go into the photo mode, then change the aperture, then go back into video mode, go back into live view, check if it's right, and if not, do the whole thing over and over again. I don't know who came up with that idea. It's a bit crazy. As you can imagine, I was keen to switch to something where that wasn't a problem. One of the good things about the Nikon D610 though is it did have 2 card slots. And as we know from the internet, that's the most important thing in photography, is to make sure that you've got 2 slots. So I started out with Canon, and I felt like that's what I wanted to go back to. With all the camera companies, the big ones, releasing new mirrorless cameras, I thought now's a good time to jump ship. I can start fresh, start from scratch, new lenses, all that type of stuff, and go with Canon. So it's a year on with the EOS R, and I've discovered a few surprises along the way. Some of them good, some of them are not so good. Got to be honest about that. There are a few quirks that are a bit unusual, but there's also a few quirks which are quite helpful, and I think, oh, I didn't realise that. But the first surprise was this camera is a lot better than the internet would have you believe when they first announced the specs, and everyone was going crazy about it. 1 card slot, cropped 4K, oh no, in-body image stabilization, no, how could they do this, how stupid were they? Well, it's actually nowhere near as bad as that. The first thing I noticed and was surprised about was when I first held the camera, the build quality is actually really good. It's a mixture of metal and plastic. I think it's got the magnesium shell to it. The top of the camera is all metal, and then there's some high quality plastics there. And the ergonomics are great. It feels better than any of the other mirrorless cameras that I've actually used, and I've used them all apart from the Panasonic SH1, is it? Yeah, so it's pretty good. It feels nice in the hand, good grip, good size grip, particularly if you've got bigger hands like myself. Yeah, you're not going to be disappointed with that. And I think the body's kind of stylish. It's got some quite nice kind of contours to it, and it feels really good. It feels solid and strong, but yeah, it's still quite light. So it's a decent feeling camera. One of the things that I really like are the dials on the top of the camera, on the back at the top, and the front one where you adjust your aperture and that type of thing. They're actually made out of metal this time instead of plastic like the DSLR ones, and it's got this kind of spiky, rough texture to it. And when the camera's boxed fresh, they really are spiky and grippy, and it feels really nice. So that's a big improvement. I hope they keep that going forward. All the buttons are what you'd expect. They're in the right places. There's not many of them, but the ones that are there are where you need them. They all feel fine to the touch, not cheap at all. The one thing that I'm a bit disappointed with, and I don't like at all, is the D-pad on the back, the direction pad. It feels, I wouldn't say cheap, but it feels like it comes from a different camera. Did Canon have a load of these left over from another camera and they needed to put them somewhere? Maybe they have to use them up. I don't know, but yeah, it's not up to the quality of the rest of the camera, but it's not bad. And particularly, I hardly use it anyway because the camera is obviously made for the touchscreen. You know, why would you bother using that to go through the menus or whatever when you can literally just tap on the screen, select what you want, swipe through your images. And speaking of touching things, that's what I kept accidentally doing with the touch bar thing on the top. Every time I'd take the camera out, at some point my thumb would slide over and I'd start playing with the settings that I didn't want to change, and I didn't even know I was changing them. All of a sudden I'm like, the camera's got a mind of its own, what's it doing? And I was like, oh yeah, it's the touch bar thing, I've accidentally tapped it. So now I have to have that turned off at all times. I don't even have it on the setting where you can press it for 3 seconds, unlock it and then use it. It's just a bit clumsy. A nice try, nice to go with the innovation, but it didn't work. Let's get rid of it and have a thumbstick back there, because that's much more useful, I think, than the touch bar thing. So you can actually pick your AF points with your thumb on the back of the touchscreen. You can have it set up so that you can use the top right section of the touchscreen as like a trackpad. So when you've got the camera up to your eye, you can move your thumb around and it'll move the AF points around. It works pretty well, surprisingly well in fact. It's better than what I thought it would be. It's still not without its flaws. Again, you can kind of accidentally swipe when you don't mean to, or touch it with your nose or something. So it's not perfect. I think if you had that in conjunction with a thumbstick, that would be much better. And of course, you can't use the trackpad when you're wearing gloves or whatever, out shooting like that, which I tend to do a lot because it's cold around here. And so, yeah, that's a bit disappointing. Definitely need a thumbstick on future EOS Rs going forward. Definitely, 100%, that's what you need. Don't not do it, Canon. You have to do it. For the longest time, I've preferred shooting with really wide angle lenses if I can. I do a lot of kind of street photography, landscape photography, cityscapes, that sort of thing, and I really like to be able to get nice and wide. So something like an 18-35 was where I was most comfortable. But I've actually been really surprised with this kit lens, if you can call it a kit lens. It is an L lens, but the lens that's bundled with the EOS R is the 24-105 f4, and it's a fantastic lens, far better than I had any expectations that it would be. The f4 isn't too much of a problem for me because I'm normally shooting with a deep depth of field, so I'm normally at like f10, f11 anyway, so that's not a problem. But also you can get some kind of nice bokeh and stuff if you're on the 105mm end and you're at f4. You can blow the background out a bit there. Not obviously what you could do with like a 1.8, but you know, it's surprisingly nice. I like having that extra reach. I didn't think I would, but it's given me a lot of options with opening up my creativity, getting new shots of areas where I've been many times before. So I really do like that, and it's a sharp lens. It's actually really, really sharp. Great picture quality out of it. It's also stabilized. Obviously the EOS R doesn't have any stabilization in there, but this has stabilization and it works really, really well. So yeah, pretty happy with that. Downsides to the lens are it's probably too heavy for the EOS R body. You know, it gives this kind of front pull, front weight to it. Might be different when you've got the battery grip on the camera. I don't have that at the moment. Probably a little bit too heavy. You could do with having a bigger body if you're going to shoot with a lens that's got that sort of weight to it. When I first saw the control ring on the Canon RF lenses, I have to say I thought it was a bit of a gimmick. I wasn't sure why they needed to introduce that, but I've been surprised by it. I actually use it all the time. I've got mine set to exposure compensation, which is something you don't have easy access to on the body as it is. So it's much easier if you put it on the lens, twist away, and change that exposure compensation. You can of course put it to ISO or aperture or whatever you want, and it makes a really cool noise when you're twisting it. In fact, I'll get it and show it you. It's a cool noise. I appreciate that. I probably wouldn't appreciate it when I'm doing video, but I don't use exposure compensation when I'm doing video, so not a problem there for me. Might be a problem for you. One more thing with the lens. These lens caps are a pain in the arse. I don't know who came up with this design, but there's only one way now for the lens cap to go on the lens. You have to line it up perfectly with the little red dot and then twist it. On the old ones, the EF lenses, there was actually 3 different positions you could put it in. So you could quite easily just put it on, spin it, get it right, and it would fit. Now that doesn't work. If you put it on in the wrong position, it won't go on. You have to line it up perfectly, and that can be a pain when you're trying to change lenses with one hand, it's in your camera bag or whatever, trying to get in there, it's like, oh, just fucking go on it, will ya? But hey, if you're looking to adapt your old lenses, you've got EF lenses, and you want to put them on the EOS R body, you don't have to worry about the adapter ring for the camera. It works perfectly. I haven't had a problem with that. I only have one full frame lens, or I only had one at the time, and there's never been a problem. It focuses exactly the same as when it's on a normal DSLR body. So yeah, spot on. If you've got a lot of old glass, you're looking to move up, I shouldn't see you having a problem whatsoever. That's pretty cool. What I did have though was quite a substantial amount of APS-C lenses, so cropped lenses. And one of the strange things with the body is if you put on an EF lens, which is the Canon cropped lens, the camera will detect the lens and it will auto crop in to give you the best field of view on that lens, cutting out any distortion or vignetting that you'd get around the edges of it. But an interesting thing is that it's only Canon who make EF lenses. All the other cropped lenses that are made for Canon are actually in the EF, not the EFS. So when you put them on the camera doesn't detect them as being cropped lenses, and it won't actually crop in on them. So you have to go into the camera, set that manually. That can be a little bit annoying. But an interesting quirk is that some of the lenses actually cover the full frame sensor, even though they're cropped frame lenses. So, for example, I have an 11-16 Tokina, and putting that on, if you zoom into the 16mm end, it actually covers the full frame. So I can now use that lens as a 16mm f2.8 prime lens. The lens I'm currently shooting on now at the moment is a Sigma 30mm, I think, 1.4, and surprisingly again, even though that's a 30mm 1.4, if you're in the full frame mode on the camera, it doesn't detect that it's a cropped lens, and it actually covers the whole sensor. So it's almost like it's got two different sizes, that lens. It's interesting, it was a nice surprise, but I can't guarantee which lenses that would work with and which ones wouldn't. So, if you've got some, take the chance. Maybe it could work, might not, I don't know. Some other things about the EOS R that surprised me: there's a histogram when you're shooting now in video mode. That's good for helping you get your exposure, particularly when you're shooting in the log. That's cool, but when you switch on the record button, it disappears. That's a pain. Why did they decide on that? I don't know. Maybe the camera just can't support that. Dual pixel autofocus is awesome, particularly when you're trying to shoot yourself like this. The face tracking mode, and you can duck around, and it should be following you. The fact that you can only do the higher frame rates in the full frame mode and not in the cropped frame mode is a bit of a disappointment. I don't see why they couldn't have put 60 frames a second or even the 120 frames a second in the cropped mode. It's a bit disappointing. You can only do them in full frame mode, and you can only do the 120 frames in 720p. So it would have been cooler if they could incorporate them all. I don't know why they couldn't. Is it a limitation on the processor in the camera? Probably, but come on. Could have worked around it somehow. The manual focus assist is a cool little tool that you've got in there now. So if you've got a manual lens on there or you're focusing manually, you can turn the ring and you get this kind of little display that they have on the cinema cameras where you have two arrows and they come together and meet. I quite like the little game of trying to get them to come together and stop and just where you want them. So that's nice, although I would have preferred the focus peaking that you get on other cameras, because that shows you the whole screen. It doesn't just show you the autofocus point that you have it on, and of course it's only as good as the autofocus is. If the autofocus is actually missing, it'll give you a false reading and it'll tell you that it's in focus when it's not. With the RF lenses, you actually get the distance scale as well come up on the screen and in the viewfinder, but you don't get that if you're using EF glass. I don't know why. Surely they could have been able to do that with both lenses. Is that just something they're limiting just to make you have the RF lenses? Bit strange, but again, maybe it's something to do with the amount of contacts on the lens and it can't transfer that information over. Who knows? But the biggest surprise I had with the camera was that only having one card slot wasn't the end of the world, but two would have been much better. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, subscribe, like, all that stuff. But only if you want to. You don't have to. I'm not your dad. I'm not going to force you to do that. I've got no way of forcing you to do that, have I? Anyway, ta-ra.